It is a 9-hour drive from the coastline of Maine to the Gross McCleaf Gallery in Philadelphia, where painter Douglas Martenson's show Transience opened on October 4th, 2017.
It'll be up through the month of October.
The winter of 2015-16 was tough on Maine. There was a heavy snow in the fall. They lost a lot of trees and branches. When we arrived for a yearly sojourn in August, there was a large pile of tree debris in the field next to our house. I rushed out to do a quick watercolor as to cement the image for me. That summer, I continued to work on that pile and searched out additional piles nearby. When I returned to the studio that fall, I was thinking of how the pile could be used as a conversation about impermanence, and how the piles, clouds, tents all continued this conversation. Transience, the title of the exhibition, is itself a paradox. Nature preceded and will supersede man's presence, but is forever changing. The artist, by virtue of observation and interpretation, makes permanent a fleeting moment. I am exploring the ephemeral qualities of the observed world, whether I'm looking upward at cloud formations or outward toward the meadows and the trees. There is an indirect human intervention in my landscapes, the building up and destruction. In these paintings, although usually only implied, man has a function as both a custodian and a user of nature, and is reminded of his own fragility and impermanence. Piles of tree branches are burned to make way for new growth. Party tents are erected, serve their purpose, and are taken down.
Doug, you're a very skillful realist painter, but there have always been ideas behind your work.
I believe realism is a forum for ideas and contemporary thoughts. I was doing a slide presentation for my students. I went back to work that I did in 1983, and I realized that there was a continual thread of working with nature, how nature will supersede whatever's around it. I started with these junkyards, and I loved the abstraction that was in them, but I also loved the way nature started to reclaim and rebuild. So contemporary is, in many people's minds, something using text, using video, different found objects, and I feel painting can still express that.
You have always had an incredibly expressive quality to your paint. And I look at some of these paintings. You have brush turning into smoke and fire, going up into the sky and clouds. Everything is portrayed very believably, but you look closely and it's all these different types of application of paint. That must be fun.
It is. It's joyful is what it is, and it's expressive. But I think that's what paint can do. So paint can make this physical presence. It'll represent things, but it can also be paint itself. So that's the alignment that I have with abstraction, that there isn't a separation. Through the content, the ideas, and then with the application, it's really aligned with abstraction. So you're right, that smoke is actually done completely out of my head, but it grows into something, and it's allowed to be when I keep noticing the parts of it building and where it's going to go.
And the way you make the very thick impasto.
Yeah, that's right. I was putting pure cadmium yellow on with just the side of the brush, so it would really have a presence. It lifts out from the painting about 1/4 of an inch. And because it catches light and because it's so thick and dense, it really creates this sense of fire. You can really feel it. And that's the alignment with tonalism. You know, this idea that we keep thinking that you can feel, there's something you can project, there's something that's beyond just what we're observing. You know, there's got to be something more. That's what I'm finding as I'm getting older. There has to be something more.
Those large white tents are used for outdoor festivals, parties, and yet in your paintings there's something almost like a sepulcher about them.
I feel that too. When I first encountered the tents, it was after a wedding and everybody had left. And I just had this feeling that I wasn't invited. The party had happened and I wasn't there. And I just thought that was so moving and powerful. And so I didn't want to put an activity in there because I wanted it to be about this sense of loneliness, openness, because we're all essentially on our own. And so it really creates that. But it also, again, brought up the abstraction of it. You know, once you put a person in there, there's a narrative. And so this way, the tent itself can be the narrative. One of the aspects was the idea of artists living on through other artists. When they die, they still have an impact because you're influenced by them and you're inspired. One of the artists I was influenced by is Thomas Cole, certainly because he started to represent the American landscape. But also when I was doing these clouds, especially the one called Stormy Day, it really reminded me of the oxbow because of the way he has the storm on the one side and the clearing on the other. And even though I made the land quite small and a more reductive aspect of it, it still had that same quality of something opening up and changing and developing. And that becomes a permanence, having these artists that grow and live on with you. The other influence that continues to live with me is with Lou Sloan, one of my favorite teachers at the Pennsylvania Academy. And he really focused a lot on clouds. And I often wonder that my focus on these lately is really to do with him. His influence on me, now that I have time to work it through, I can see that.
The wonderful Lou Sloan has passed on, but Doug has been a professor at the Pennsylvania Academy for some time now. I asked some students about him.
Hi, I'm Daniel Flinchbell, and I've had Doug Martenson for a year and a half now at PAFA.
The best thing about Doug when he teaches painting is how he tries to get you to capture space and the moment. And he has helped me an incredible amount. I'm mature in my painting style and also as a person. His favorite thing to tell me is probably to put more blue in order to capture more space. So,
How does that work?
how does that work? He'll swing by wherever I'm painting and tell me that painting needs more blue here, here, and here in order to push it back more. And I put it in even though I think he's wrong, and lo and behold, he's usually right. So, yeah.
Are you guys Academy students?
Yeah.
And Doug is pretty good?
He's great. Doug is the best.
What makes Doug good? Is he empathetic? Does he throw people's paintings out the window?
He pushes you out of your comfort zone, definitely, I think. For me, that's what he did. So, helped me a lot. So, yeah.
It's very nice. Nicely said.
You grew up in an area that looks a lot like this, right?
Yes, I grew up in upstate New York at the Finger Lakes, Fayetteville outside of Syracuse. A lot of rolling hills and farmlands. It's very similar to what we have in Maine, actually. I would wander the fields in back of my house, and that's where I started painting. Go out in the backyard and paint what I could. But yeah, I think I am always searching for that.
There's an unfairness to this world. Much as I believe all my artist videos should go viral, sadly, they do not. So I'm going to use a little trick to try to boost views. Hello, what's your name, miss?
Camille Peluso Martenson.
Martenson? Are you Doug's sister?
I'm his wife.
Can shoes be a work of art?
Yes, they can. I don't know who made them. I just like them, so I bought them.
Okay.
They have an architectural quality that I like. That's why I purchased them.
I think a beautiful woman with nice shoes might attract a YouTube audience. So I'm going to slowly.
Oh, goodness. Goodness me, there's my shoes.
Camille, what's Doug's painting schedule like?
If left to his druthers, he'd paint all the time. But he does some teaching in between, and we travel so he can paint.
How did you guys pick Maine as a place to regularly go?
That's my doing. I used to go to Maine before I met Doug, and I just thought the natural beauty was so spectacular that I thought he ought to see it. And he was like, oh, you know, how many painters have painted Maine? But once we got there, and we were fortunate enough to rent a beautiful place, which is a lot of acreage on the water, right at our own beach. It's been really inspirational to him. It's very wild. So it was my doing, and now we can't not go there. We have to go. I admire Doug's work because it evokes a feeling, and it also brings a freshness to realism. There's a modernism to it that you don't always see. It's kind of inspirational and very uplifting, I think. They make you feel better and whole, and like there's a continuum. I think that's really nice.
In addition to his oils, Doug is also exhibiting works done with water-based media.
A combination of watercolor and gouache. The gouache is usually just white though, and then I mix the watercolor into the gouache and it makes a more opaque pigment, almost like pastel. But it also allows for these amazing transparencies that only come from watercolor. And then you can opaque it again to build it up. So it becomes this flip-flopping of different forms, and it becomes another painted expression. But I've been very excited about it once I found this handmade paper, an artist craftsman, made in India. It's incredibly absorbent, so I put a coat of matte medium on it, and then when I paint on it, it doesn't quite absorb as much. But it really creates this great base that you can work off of.
Have you always done watercolors?
I have, yeah. I've done watercolor, and then there was a lot of graphite wash that I did. So this is graphite and graphite wash, as well as opaque watercolor for the white highlights on a toned paper. I'm using it so that I can get these very clear tonal references and build the forms out of this gray, cloudy existence. This drawing I call Follow. And it really is a response to what's been happening this year. And I keep thinking that we're creating these cabals, and this is just a group of people that have gathered together that are going off to we don't know where, and then there becomes this switchback of that one figure. So they're following, and then break back at that one point. But I've done a whole series, and I hope to be showing it pretty soon, or at least start turning them into paintings.
Doug, there's something a little melancholy about your new work. We're getting older. Do you think that has something to do with it?
I think it's just a time of reflection, not necessarily that we're older. Yeah, I think it's really just more that I'm aware of everything that's out there, and I'm trying to weave it together in some way. So there's a sense of connection. I was thinking also how we create these communities. We create them through school, where we work. Where I am at the Pennsylvania Academy, we have a strong community, and it's a very supportive one. You, John, represent another community, and that comes from when I was a student, when I was younger. And our friends, Kurt Sampson, Stanley Beeland, Pat Connors, we're all friends. We're all still connected, and we're connected through art. We care about what each one is doing and how we're developing through the years. Things come and go. They are transient, but friendships last. They are something that we build, and when you look back through the years, that's what we can count on.